everyone, welcome to the 5-Year Plan. I'm Brian, and this is the ongoing saga of an everyman's ale trail. In this episode, I head to the Iron City, reveal the next homebrew project, check up on Cody at 2 Times Brewing, and review a non-alcoholic beer. But before we get this party started, here is this episode's burning question. What is your favorite NA IPA? I checked Untappd, and my favorite comes from Untitled Art. Their juicy IPA reminds me why they make some of the best non-alcoholic beers. It pours a hazy light golden color with a nice foamy head and looks like the real deal. It has a sweet tropical nose, which is exactly like I would expect. It has a soft mouthfeel and a great citrus peel bite. You would never know that the beer comes in at 0.5% ABV. The Everyman had a chance encounter with a couple of craft beverage lovers a few years back while visiting one of my favorite meaderies, Four Fires in Toledo, Ohio. This couple was from Birmingham, Alabama, and celebrating their 16th anniversary, which is the so-called wax anniversary. These two were very clever, always trying to tie in a destination with the anniversary. So why mead? Well, wax to beeswax to bees to honey. Makes perfect sense to me. Anyway, they both indicated that Birmingham was a great beer destination. I was a bit skeptical because I had never heard anyone before on the ale trail mention that to me. So that thought has been rattling around in my head ever since. It just so happened we were visiting my parents in Alabama for a few days on our way to some Florida sunshine, so it seemed like it was finally an opportune time to visit the Iron City. I did a little bit of research ahead of time, of course, to maximize the trip. I could see that the majority of the breweries were spread along the center of the town, nicely spaced from west to east. This would make planning and traveling a little bit easier. We arrived in Birmingham at around 5 p.m. local time on a Saturday. It was a warm, sunny day, and after experiencing snow back home, it was a welcome sight. We parked a couple blocks away and walked to our first destination, Good People Brewing, located within a stone's throw of the University of Alabama, Birmingham. We sat down at the bar, and Shayna waited on us. The brewery had high ceilings and had a warm, kind of farmhouse feel. They had a lot of choices on the menu. I opted for a flight with a passion fruit sour, a saison, a Czech dark lager, and their Snake Handler double IPA. I also added a 5th taster of their El Gordo barrel-aged Imperial Stout. All were solid, though El Gordo was amazing. The next destination was Birmingham District Brewing. It was not within walking distance per se, since we had a long night ahead, so we got in the car for a 5-minute drive. We parked and then sat down at the bar, being immediately greeted by Aaron. I looked over the dozen beers on tap and placed my order. Taster sizes of Birmingham Pilsner, a fruited sour, and a Schwarzbier. The brewer Jimmy was also milling around and shared some insights into the history of the city's beer scene. My wife also had a nice chat with Lena at the bar, who was delightful. We had a great time, but sadly needed to move on. At this point, I was pretty excited about Birmingham. The next stop was a place called Uproot Brewing Company. From the outside, it had a modern look to it. They were a bit busy, and we sat at the last 2 seats at the end of the small bar. Nate served us up some tasty beers. I had an Italian Pilsner and a blueberry and blackberry sour called Blue Balls. As I paid, I shared a sticker and cards promoting the podcast with him and did the same with Steve, who was enjoying some beer as well nearby. Trim Tab Brewing was next on the list. It was just a few blocks south of Uproot and within walking distance. I was familiar with Trim Tab and had enjoyed a few of their beers because of their regional distribution. We walked in the door and Rachel was behind the bar. They're pretty well known for their sours, and I planned to drink what I could, which was not distributed. With a dozen choices, I opted for a raspberry cherry Berliner, an amazing farmhouse ale called Ginny, the reindeer cookies double pastry stout, and the kitchen sink IPA to finish it out. Now, here's where things get interesting. As I was enjoying the beers, a guy walks up to us, introduces himself as David, and asks us about the podcast. Seeing that I was clearly confused, he said he was at the previous spot and overheard my talking to people at Uproot. He went on to talk about a lot of different things, but beer was the topic. He said he had so many one-off and member-only cans from Trim Tab that he could not drink them all. He asked if I would be interested in some of them. Of course I was game. We exchanged phone numbers and agreed we would reconvene at his apartment building after we got some food, as he was not too far from our next stop. I was now intrigued, so my wife and I hopped in the car and made our way to Back 40 Beer Company, which we were told had some really good food. We settled on sharing a cheeseburger because we've been nibbling on food and appetizers all day long. They were really busy and had a wonderful outdoor space. Sadly, the burger took a very long time and frankly was a bit ordinary. The upside was that I did have a great beer called Puck Kettle Sour made with blackcurrant, blackberry, and raspberry. I sent David a text and he gave us his address. As we drove to the location, there were no parking spaces available on the street, so we pulled into the parking lot of the Piggly Wiggly across the street and waited. A few minutes later, I see David emerge from the apartment complex carrying a flat of beer. As he got closer, I could see it was a case of 24 16-ounce cans. And he had a plastic grocery sack with a dozen 12-ounce cans. And a bomber of an Imperial Stout. I was blown away and speechless. He also said we needed to stop at Hop City Beer and Wine to get a beer made by the manager, Ralph Marion. I'd seen Hop City when I was doing my research, but didn't put it on my list because it wasn't a true brewery, but I agreed we would stop in. He said I couldn't miss Ralph. He had dreadlocks and was known as the Beard Black Man. I told David I would keep him updated on my progress drinking his beers and if we found any interesting stops along the way. We backtracked to Hop City, which turned out was not too far from Trim Tab. We walked in to see a bar with 60 beers on tap. And to the right, there was a wide-open retail space with shelves upon shelves of beer, wine, and other beverages. I looked through the untapped draft list and ordered number 55, barrel-aged even more chata. It was a 9.4% ABV stout with cinnamon, coconut, vanilla, and chocolate. It was smooth and decadent. While I was ordering the beer and beginning to enjoy it, my wife was off perusing the aisles of beer. Ralph saw her and asked if she had any questions. She asked about any new beers or recommendations he might have. He started pulling things off of the shelves and into the cart that she had conveniently found nearby. Long story short, and a dozen or so cans of beers later, we paid and moved on to our next destination. Cheers, Ralph. I hope we can stop by again the next time we pass through. The night was getting late and we still had a couple more stops to make. Cahaba was a few minutes down the road. It was a pretty big location. The taproom was a shared space with their brew house. I always like that kind of a space because then I can kind of see what they're doing and look at their equipment. They had a great outdoor space too, which is where we landed. Well, because I like to support causes breweries participate in, I had a Pouring for Neighbors IPA collab with Cherry Street Brewing, benefiting the North Carolina community affected by the hurricanes. It was a darn good beer. It was nearly 10 p.m., so we hustled down the street for one more stop at True Story Brewing. As we arrived, we could see the lights were still on, so we hopped out, opened the door, and sat down at the bar. Within a few seconds, owner and head brewer Craig peeked around the corner and told us they had just closed. We shared that we were from out of town, and that I had a podcast, and this was our last stop of the night. He agreed to sit and talk over a beer. For some reason, he only had one of his beers on tap, so I ordered the Oofda Double IPA to end my night. It was clear he and his wife Anna had done a lot of work to the brewery. And then, to try and diversify the business, they added a kitchen in 2020, and then had recently expanded their footprint next door to a space where he had built a stage for live music, comedy shows, and other special events. He, too, was passionate about his beers and the craft. We thanked him and closed down the bar. So with that, our night in Birmingham came to a close. I collapsed into bed at the hotel and drifted off to sleep. This has to be one of my favorite beer city destinations thus far in our travels. Everyone we met was incredibly friendly, and in the case of David, extremely generous. The beer scene here is solid. If you find yourself anywhere nearby, tell them you heard about Birmingham, Alabama on the podcast, and that the Everyman sends his regards. In this segment of Homebrew Hijinks, it's time to reveal the next homebrew project. Where I live, there is a family-owned strawberry farm that has been around for over 40 years. They have some of the best berries around. And it got me thinking, this would be a great profile for a beer. But what style? Well, as you know, I'm always trying to brew different styles to expand my horizons. So I decided to brew a strawberry cream ale. Next episode, I will kick off the mash on the Creek Valley Cream Ale. Now, it's time for Barstool Banter. This episode, I do a kind of Where Are They Now with Cody Moon from Two Toms Brewing in Fort Wayne, Indiana. You might remember him from the podcast a couple of years ago. The dude loves to talk, and I was more than happy to listen. His love for beer and brewing hasn't changed. His priorities have, and I can't wait for you to hear what he is up to at the moment. Welcome to Barstool Banter. I'm sitting down with Cody Moon from Two Toms Brewing in Fort Wayne, Indiana. You might remember him from our Season 2 episode in the podcast. Cody, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me again on the podcast.
Absolutely, man. I'm glad to be back.
Great. Well, first of all, it has been a while. A lot of things have happened in the last couple of years. Can you kind of get me up to date on what's happened the last time we spoke?
Yeah, man. I was just thinking about that before I hopped on here. I was like, man, I was with Science Project when we last talked, right?
Yep.
We had that opportunity to open Science Project, and that's kind of how I met you through Tom's Beer School, and you came and saw me there. And long story short, summer, end of 2023, my wife and I's plans changed, and we kind of decided, hey, we're ready to settle down. Had been married for almost 6 years at that point. If we're going to have a kid, probably should have tried to have a kid. And so, I was looking at life as a whole, and I kind of decided that I wanted to be active in a future kid's life. I wasn't going to be an hour and a half after teaching all day from my child and my wife. And so I gave myself, this is a 9 months notice. When my wife says, hey, we're pregnant, it's 9 months notice to Science Project, unfortunately. But I was going to grind that out. And before I could get to that point, I was approached by Tom at Two Toms Brewing here in Fort Wayne about coming on. And at the time, it was kind of like productions manager kind of situation. It wasn't a full-time gig, but it was something that we were going to look at bringing me on more and more. And yeah, Tom yourself, but
Yeah.
Tom's one of I considered him a really good friend beforehand, a role model in the industry. And so ultimately I accepted that job, came back to Fort Wayne. That happened basically end of September, beginning of October 2023. And then in May, my wife and I welcomed our first kid. So little Mac was born last May, and we decided we didn't want to do daycare life. So I actually stepped away from the classroom in August. I came to Tom's full-time now. I say full-time, but it's more of a part-time, full-time situation. It's like I got a weird schedule. Tom worked with me a lot to be able to create a schedule where we don't do daycare life. So today my wife is at work and I'm home with Mac, and I'm doing sales from the couch, doing social media stuff from the couch. But I do wear a lot of hats now for Tom. So I do some social media, I do some bartending hours, I do outside sales, I do help with him on anything he needs help with. I still try to be active in the brew room and doing stuff. Duffy kind of taking over the full-time brewer pretty much for the most of it. Him and Tom are working in there together basically now, and still try to stay active in there as much as I can because the creative aspect is something I love about brewing. But right now, I'm doing what makes ends meet for the family, what's best for our team at Tom's, and at some point, hopefully get back in that brew room full time and go from there.
Well, it's certainly good to have your priorities in order. Honestly, trying to make time for your kid is really, it's of paramount importance. It really is, because you don't realize how fast things change.
We were just
Yeah.
talking about before we got on the call, Mac's almost a year old. My
Oh,
kiddo
yeah.
is 22 and going to graduate from college this spring.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
it was like a snap of the finger and it was like done. It's just crazy how fast time flies. It really is.
I'm very lucky for the time that I was given, and the opportunity I was given. Big thanks to Tom. I came to him, and he's a busy guy too, and he was very, I think when we were looking at schedules and how we could build my own kind of schedule with him, he was very particular on, hey, I'll do whatever you want to do, but let's make sure that you have time for that kid and your wife and stuff. So that's super important to me. And my dad worked out of town my entire life to support our family, and very thankful for that growing up, but it was something that, I know he missed a lot of stuff of mine, and I don't want to be like that for Max. So, it's been awesome. It's been a great time, and it kind of gives you a different look at how life should be, I guess, too. So, yeah, this spring you're going to be celebrating college graduation. I'll be celebrating 1 year birthday party, and we're in different lives right now, but beer pulls us together, which is awesome.
Absolutely. So it sounds to me like you're living your best life. You're more or less full time in the industry. You're supporting your family, enjoying family time. So, what else could you be doing that would make it even better?
Oh man, I don't know. Obviously, I'd like to be brewing more right now. I'm kind of living through the guys at work right now, but it's cool to like get those texts from like Duffy or Tom being like, "How would you do this?" or "This is what's going on. How can we fix this?" kind of thing. And so I get to get those gears rolling. I'm like, I say I'm like part time, full time, but if you ask my wife, she's like, "You're full time beer all the time." Um, I'm always thinking about it. I'm always like, "What's the new rage? What's the new situation there?" So I don't know, man. I feel like in the last year with Mac, we haven't really traveled as much as I'm getting ready. Like I told you earlier, we're going to go to Puerto Rico next week. I'm looking forward to sitting on the beach. I'm looking forward to sitting and just relaxing for a couple of days. I'm going to try to do a bunch of sales this week, so I don't have to do as much when I get back next week. And I'm very blessed to be with the company that I think really pushed me to become the brewer I am, and now to be back working for him is cool. And yeah, I don't know what else I could be doing, man.
Yeah,
It's a good time. Having those days with Mac is awesome. So
that's awesome. I've always enjoyed my interactions with Tom, and I just always felt like, he's a pretty stand up guy and really respects that kind of family atmosphere. I mean, it's what it feels
oh,
like to
for
me
sure.
at Two Times. I know it's a business, and I know that like you guys are really pushing to try to expand the footprint, but I don't ever get the feeling like you've lost sight of the roots of where you started out, or Tom hasn't lost that.
Yeah, right, right. And it gets, like I mentioned earlier, it's a weird time to be in the industry, and we'll
Yeah.
get on that in a little bit. But no, that was the thing. Like originally, my wife didn't want me to away from teaching. Like, how can we make more money but have a better schedule? So when she gave me the green light to leave teaching, she's like, what would you do?" And I was like, I can try to go to Tom's full time, but like you're talking about, this is a Thursday afternoon. We're talking about this. I'm texting him on Saturday afternoon. Can I talk to you on Monday? His text back. Can you give me a little bit of what's going on? I'm kind of worried, and I'm like, hey, this is what's going on. We're talking some things. I would like to talk to you about this. And he brainstormed some stuff on his own time on the weekend. And, he's like, I can't get you to exactly where you want to be at, but if you do X, Y, and Z and, give me different opportunities, and honestly, my schedule's crazy, but I've been fortunate enough to make right about what I was making as a teacher. And I'm not working 5 days a week. I'm not working
Yeah.
5 full days a week. There are nights I work, there are full days I work, some weekends I work, but it's like for the most part, we probably only have, and really, when I say daycare hours, it's more like my in-laws watch him. We probably only have maybe 6 or 7 of those a week, and some of those they take them overnight for us, and we can get some sleep. And
Yeah.
so yeah, very fortunate. It's a very awesome opportunity. He's always checking in, making sure everything's good, going good for stuff. So yeah, he's a great guy, man. You do it too. We picked it as a home brewer. I was picking his brain. Same thing, like we talk when picking my brain about stuff. Like it was a cool opportunity relationship to build before I ever worked for the guy. And I told him the other day, I was like, it was a screenshot I found of I was posted on Facebook about fanboying about 2 of his beers back in 2019. And I was like, man, look, I was a fanboy back then, and now I text you every day. This is weird. But it's like one of those things. In the beer industry, I got the opportunity to meet Rich, who was the original brewer or one of the big brewers at 18th Street. He's now brewing for Blockhead out of Valpo. And if I would have met him as a home brewer, I would have been like starstruck. Now he's just
Right.
like this normal guy who trolls me on the internet. We were talking about like, oh yeah, like who are these guys for you? And he's like, oh, like well, I know the guy from Jester King. I know the guy from here. I'm friends with a brewer from Burial, which is like my total favorite brewery. And it's like it's weird to think that like the atmosphere that a person in the industry can create for someone who's outside looking in.
Yeah. I know
Yeah.
we talked when you were at Science Project going from your recipes from your homebrew system to 3 barrel system there, something like that.
3.5. Yeah,
And
3.5.
then now you're what, 10, 12, 15 barrel at Tom's?
So Tom's brew house is a little different because it's a
Okay.
Colorado brew house. So really, the base recipe is just 5.
Okay.
Still,
Okay.
still bigger. I mean, you were right on that aspect. It's still bigger, but because of how it's set up, we have 2 8-barrel kettles that we can do 2 5-barrel batches in. So in a single day, we could do a single 5. We could do a 5 of one thing, a 5 of another at the same time. We could do 2 5s of the same thing for a 10-barrel batch, or like we sometimes do back-to-back brew days for our loggers where we do 10 and then either a 5 the next day or a 10 the next day and get that 20-barrel tank filled. So it's a weird aspect of it, but yeah, it's still bigger than what I was at before.
So scalability, I mean, clearly going from your homebrew system to the 3.5 barrel to
Yeah,
the 5, I mean, that's got to be challenging. I know even for me trying to scale a 5 or even a 3 back to the 1 gallon, which I'm still brewing the small pilot batches
I
kind of,
love that.
you know,
I love
it's
the
still tough,
yeah.
trying to get that right.
Thankfully, it's 2025 and there's software for everything at this point now. But
Absolutely.
some people, I think that the issue, even like what's kind of what you're doing, like a majority of recipes for homebrewers online are 5 gallons. Like you might find a 5 gallon kit at like a homebrew store that they already pre-made for you, or someone's recipe online or whatever. And some people, like when you think about it, it's just okay, divide everything by half or by 5, and that now we're doing 1 or divided by 1.5 or doing 3 or whatever else. It's not always the truth on that. And
Right.
it's the same concept, man. Like if you had a chili recipe that you used to make at 1 gallon every time, and then you go to a chili cook off and you gotta make 5, you can't just say I'm gonna do 5 times the amount of stuff, because stuff does interact differently. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing for brewing. It's similar. I mean, you probably could get very close to what you were looking for. I mean, it absolutely is just different when it comes to volumes and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I think at Science Project, when I went from 5 gallons roughly to 110, scaling that made it really easy to scale from this to the 155. Again, I have software that I can plug in and it does it for me for the most part. I always tell the story, like I was very fortunate at Science Project where I did not have to ever dump a finished batch of beer. So knock on wood for that. But my very first batch of beer, I scaled up as a milk stout, went to brew it. As it finished, it was just complete roast bomb. And I looked at the recipe and I'm like, oh, the roast malt itself, it did not scale correctly. It was way altered. And thankfully, I was throwing a fit at the bar before we ever released it. Mad that I ruined my first batch of commercial beer and was drinking a cold brew from the place next door and side by side tasting, and was like, wait a minute, like cold brew into the unfinished beer. Oh, let's go add cold brew. And it was a beer that sold really well for us. And they're like, bring it back, bring it back. And I was like, I need you to realize, like, it's never coming back. I'm not going to brew that same recipe with the idea that I have to fix it again. And I'm not going to purposely try to brew it fixed and then hope it tastes the same. So I scale it with my software now, but I definitely make sure before I ever brew it, like, hey, like if originally it was 2 pounds of roasted malt or roasted barley, whatever, and it 5 to 110 or 5 to 155 is, X amount of times, it should be close to this and not 100 pounds heavier than what it's supposed to be. So, base malt, you just get more alcohol, but like the specialty malts, you could get some real strong, astringent flavors, all because you just didn't look at that like that. So, the idea that I didn't have to write a recipe at 10 barrels is super thankful for that. A typical brew house like ours, because we brew majority of our stuff at 10, it would have been interesting to go from a 5 gallon batch to a 3.5 to a 10. And I still write a lot of my recipes at 5 gallons because it's what I know,
Right.
which is weird. I think it kind of terrifies me to be like, all right, I'm going to write a stout recipe at 5 barrels, 800 pounds of two row. Like it doesn't sit well with me. 5 gallons is what I know. It's what I've been used to. So it's kind of just write and scale up still to this day. Thankful for Beersmith and that opportunity to just scale for me.
Yeah, I think since we talked, I actually subscribe now to Brewers Friends. That's what I use. So
Cool.
now,
Yep.
now I understand the percentages and how that all plays
Yep.
into, making
Yep.
your beer. So it's been a learning experience, but it's like, okay, this starts to make sense a little bit more. Definitely thankful for software.
And I use Brewer's Friend, I use Beersmith, I use Brewfather. I use different things I feel like do better at different things. And
Okay.
I kind of just bounce around. But yeah, I mean, very thankful that someone spent the time coding that for me and doing it to the best of my ability.
Absolutely. So what's one of the craziest ingredients you've ever used in one of your beers?
I use crazy stuff, but I feel like not super out there. I mean, obviously, I do the king cake beer every year. So my original one with that was king cake.
Yeah.
I threw like actual king cakes in the beer.
That was such a good beer.
Oh, dude, I'm still releasing it at Tom's. We've released it 2 times at Tom's now under a new name, but still king cake. I debated on catching up with cicadas when that was happening and doing a barrel aged cicada beer where I was going to barrel age it till the next time they came out of the ground. That probably would have been weird. I have a recipe written for it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's anything that like when people look at me and be like, "Oh, like that's interesting that you did that," but nothing too crazy that I feel like would like red flag. I mean, I've read about a lot of weird stuff, but off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that I'm like, that was probably dumb.
I have to admit, when I see like Mangalista or oysters or something, like,
Oh yeah,
this doesn't. I don't know if that sounds really good or not.
I know that like we're working right now with Elm Street Brewing out of Muncie. We're gonna forage a beer in the
Oh,
fall, I think.
nice.
Like gonna do a forage ingredient. There's a recipe that Tommy wrote for mushrooms, like wild mushrooms, some sort of wild mushrooms in a beer. Yeah, nothing I can like think of off the top of my head that I'm like, this would stand out to people. That's weird. Like I think my issue is I think if you talk to like a more traditional brewer, they would think some of the stuff I have done, like the king cakes or the 70 packages of Oreos from the cookies and cream ice cream stout or the amount of marshmallow fluff that we use. They'd probably be like, yeah, come on, dude. Like that's a little bit much.
Speaking of crazy ingredients, I know it was a little bit tongue in cheek, but you had a really fun social media series that went on about a new beer that you're putting
Yes.
together. Can you
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the beer's called Not Our Money. And it all kind of started off as an inside joke. So obviously tried to go to a lot of Tom's events. And so I was at the Luau in 2023. It's our anniversary in July. We throw a luau party every year. And I had a beer there, but I also stayed and served and I helped clean up. And we were pulling a wagon of a bunch of equipment back inside and something fell off and broke. And someone that was helping was like, oh crap, like it broke, blah, blah. And Duffy's like, oh, it's okay. We'll get a new one. They're not that expensive. And Tom's response to that was, oh yeah, well let's buy a new one. Like they just use my credit card. It's not their money. Ha ha ha. And so we just turned it into an inside joke inside the brew room where it was like anytime anything broke or anytime we wanted anything new, hey, let's put a movie theater in here. Let's put a flat screen on the wall to watch TV when we're brewing. Like it's not our money. And so it was a joke. It was a joke. It was a joke. And then one day we just said, hey, we should make a beer and like purposely leave time out of it. Like let's just do it ourselves. And I think the more and more Duffy thought about this beer, he was just like, I'm gonna run with it and just make it. So he whipped up the first recipe. I believe it was like we all looked at it together, kind of made sure that we wanted it to look the way it looked. And Duffy decided he wanted to do like a breakfast stout. And Duffy's background is in beer sales before he started brewing for us, and so he didn't have like the homebrew recipe writing background. So he kind of took this whole beer on his own and was like, I'm gonna run with this as my first ever release. And so he decided he wanted to do a breakfast stout. We decided on the coffee, maple syrup, chocolate, and vanilla. That's what we're gonna put in it. And so one day I get an email and it's from him and it's like a social media advertisement. He had written up all these captions where we were gonna go, and the girl who does our photographs and our labels, she photoshopped us going to these places. So we were like, in the middle of some random vanilla bean in India, place. We went to some fancy place in Quebec to get maple syrup. We did a joke on Harry Potter where we used Dark Matter's unicorn blood coffee in it. So he had us sucking the unicorn blood out of a unicorn from the Harry Potter scene, and we dropped it on St. Patty's Day weekend, and it came out really good, man. It's the flavors of all the adjuncts meld really well. There's nothing that stands way too out or nothing that doesn't show up. I know he's kind of upset a little bit because he didn't hit the mouthfeel he wanted. It's a little thinner than he wanted. But for his first round, it was awesome. I mean, if you told me that it was his first ever recipe, I wouldn't believe you probably. So he did a really good job on that. He's already excited about next year's release. I kind of want to see about looking at it maybe a semi-annual release of different stuff and just have a lot of fun. So the can label's $2 million bill or something like that, and it's got some stuff. So we had a lot of fun with it, man. And but yeah, it was mainly just Duffy. He did a really good job.
That's awesome. I'll have to get down there and try to get a can or two of that. Well, another thing I saw on your social media recently, you've already mentioned it again, was beer school. So I still have my punch card from beer school, although I'm missing one punch on it. Was sad. I missed the second beer talk, but I see you're starting that back up again.
My background as a teacher. I've done this podcast with you 2 times now. I was on a different podcast yesterday afternoon at the brewery. I love talking beer. I love talking beer with people that like beer, that brew beer, that want to know about beer. I just like talking beer. and I like to talk. I mean, that's who I am. It's just who I am. And when I joined when I joined in 2023, I mentioned to Tom. I said, "Hey, like, would you be cool with me taking that on?" And it's a feat in itself, talking. And you've met Tom. Tom's not a super in front of a group of people talking.
Right.
He's more of a, he's there and kind of thing. They did it a couple years ago without me before I was part of the team. And so last year I did 101 right before Mac was born with the idea that we were going to continue it on. Well, then I took a month off over the summer, came back, and then that's when I kind of shifted gears from like part-time overseeing stuff in the brew room to, sales, social media, tap room, kind of different job titles. So I just kind of lost it in 2024. And so this year I'm like really shooting to get all 4 classes done. We did 101 last week. It was pretty good. We did 101 last year. It was a huge class. I think because we didn't put the other ones on when we did 101 this year, it was a little bit smaller class. So maybe we'll grab some of those guys back when we do the next ones. But, always trying to figure some new things out. People want to know about it. I mean, some people just don't care. They just want to know about beer. But we do a lot of different brews, so it helps us be able to teach like the barrel aging or the sour side or those kind of things too. So I got a really cool class that I'm trying to really sell to Tom for the last class of the year. I'm not going to speak on it a whole lot just yet because it's currently a no from Tom.
Okay.
But I mean, I think off air, I think it's a class that you'd be really interested in. It's a cool opportunity for people that do care about how beer is made and its longevity and that kind of stuff. So still fingers crossed that I can talk him into doing it. I'm kind of plugging it in with people that I can be like, oh, let's tell Tom it's a good idea. Like, we can do this.
Last call.
It's nearly time to wrap things up, but first, one more for the road. This episode, I'm drinking Galaxy Ripple from Best Day Brewing out of Sausalito, California. From the brewer, Best Day's Galaxy Ripple is a bold and vibrant double IPA that bursts with tropical and piney hop aromas. Its full-bodied malt sweetness is perfectly balanced by layers of peach, pineapple, passion fruit, and pine flavors, creating an irresistible bitterness that IPA lovers crave. This is Best Day's 5th seasonal release available for a limited time. Pairs well with stargazing, space traveling, and moonwalking. Without further delay, well, this is a 0.5% ABV Imperial IPA, although I'm not really sure how that is going to work. So I found this beer at K-Rock Marathon over in Sydney, Ohio. If you're ever traveling I-75 through Ohio, it's just about 5 minutes off the highway. They have several beers on tap and a ton of craft beer in their coolers and singles for purchase as well. Since it's an Imperial IPA, I poured it into a tulip glass from one of my favorite southern breweries, Big Beach Brewing in Gulf Shores, Alabama. I poured it and it had a nice fluffy white head. And color-wise, it's kind of a light amber color. It certainly reminds me of that of what a double IPA might look like. So on the nose, it is very citrus forward, light tropical leanings. So first sip impression. Okay. So as with many non-alcoholic beers, it has that non-alcoholic beer kind of undertone to it. It's light-bodied, of course, and I do get some of the tropical flavors that are noted there, the fruitiness, a little bit of the pine bitterness. It has a nice finish on it, and it leaves me with a nice mouth coating, which again is something that I certainly would expect from an Imperial IPA. It definitely has that malty sweetness that would be very similar to that of an Imperial IPA. I know it's super challenging to make a non-alcoholic beer. I think the only thing that I would say that would make me like this beer maybe a little bit better is if it had just a little bit of body, a little bit of mouth feel to it. It just feels very flat and very thin. But overall, I think the beer delivers exactly what it describes. Again, my mind just can't wrap itself around the fact that it's labeled as an Imperial IPA, but doesn't really have that same kind of a mouthfeel to go along with. So, I give this one 3.5 tasters out of 5 on the flight board, Cheers, and best day brewing. I'm always looking for new craft beverages to review. So if you've got one from your favorite local craft brewery, meadery, or cidery you'd like me to drink and describe, reach out and let me know. That's all for this episode of the 5 Beer Plan. With so many podcasts out there, thanks for choosing to listen to mine. Join me next time as I get more answers to my homebrew questions, kick off the next homebrew project, finish up with Cody Moon, and review another beer. Remember to hit the subscribe button on your preferred podcast platform to be notified of new episodes. Follow me on Instagram as well, 5 Beer Plan 2022, to see what is happening on my personal ale trail. I'd love to hear from you, and there are several ways you may do so. Leave a comment for this episode on Spotify, direct message me on Instagram, or email me directly, 5beerplan@frontier.com. Be sure to support your local breweries, choose your beers wisely, and drink them responsibly. Until next time, keep walking your ale trail, and stay thirsty, my friends.